All right, everybody, we're back here with another session of Rubbin' Dirt with this time Jeremiah Reed. And Jeremiah is a very special person to have on this podcast because both racing USRA and IMCA, so we don't get that too often herein because basically they both kind of sides kind of butt heads, I'm noticing a lot more as we go on. But, you run B mod essentially for the USRA, and you said Sport mod for the IMCA because
Yep.
they're essentially the same thing, just called different things.
Yeah, there's a few differences, mainly just different parts that are allowed. USRA, you can have quick change. IMCA, we can't. Transmission, you can have a lighter Falcon or a Brin, I believe, in USRA, where IMCA you can't. But I just race my sport mod essentially in a sport mod package against the B mods. So
All right, so now my next question for you is why choose to run the B mod or the I'm going to refer to them as B mods a lot probably, but why choose the B mods
Um, you're referencing over like an A mod or a stock car?
over just every other kind of class out there?
Um, I really didn't have a whole lot of experience in dirt track. I actually came from dirt race or drag racing before I started dirt track, but sport mod was kind of just the one that made the most sense for me. I had helped a buddy of mine with a sport mod for a few months before I actually bought my own car, and um, that was just, to me, it made the most sense. Hobby stock, I you know didn't like necessarily the rules that were in the hobby stock class compared to sport mods. We can have headers and stuff in sport mods, and hobbies can't. So just simple things like that was kind of what made the difference. Plus, I had more experience with sport mods, so I started in sport mods. I've kind of just stuck in it. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun class. At times, it can be a little frustrating just because you have a lot of, it's essentially, it's supposed to be an entry level class, so the guys that are coming in sometimes don't have a lot of experience. So until they get enough experience, it can be kind of frustrating because they can cause a problem just from lack of experience.
I think that's everywhere we go and look at. But
Yep.
now, how did you make the transition from drag racing to dirt track racing?
It's pretty. It's more of a transition than I expected it to be. I'd watched dirt racing a lot in my childhood, younger years, teenage years, especially. Um, and it's easy from the stands. You just go in the corner and turn left and then counter steer. But once you get in the car and I wasn't used to the quick steer. I didn't have that in my drag car, so first few laps around the track, I was kind of fishtailing back and forth because I was overcorrect, and I was used to a street car. As a teenager, I'd drift around back roads and stuff, and so I was used to that. So when I got in the car and had the quick steer, I was overcorrecting all the time. But so since then, obviously, a setup is a huge deal with those cars. You don't necessarily have the power to get the car to break tires loose all the time, especially if the track's not slick. If it's heavy, it's really hard to get the tires to break traction, especially if your setup's close. So setup's the biggest thing, is just getting that right to where you can drive the car aggressively and know that it's going to stick and do what you want it to do.
All right. Well, I mean, definitely. This next question. This would be a great question to ask you. When you look at the rules for both series, is there either one that you would prefer more over the other?
So I kind of go back and forth on that. After racing both, initially when I started, I tended to lean more towards the USRA rules, just because I liked the options that it allowed. You can essentially you can get better aftermarket parts in USRA, or use better aftermarket parts, where IMCA, we still use a lot of parts that are stock parts or based on stock parts. So aftermarket stuff tends to last a little longer. It's built a little better. But on the other hand, that stuff tends to cost more too. So, and I feel like the rules, being the way they are in USRA, it's not as budget friendly. So the budget racers have a little bit harder time competing compared to IMCA. They have a lot of the basic stuff still. So it's pretty much everybody's on the same thing. And I feel, at least in my opinion, it's easier to compete a little bit in IMCA than it is in USRA. Other people may disagree, but that's just the way I feel about it.
Well, certainly, there's lots of different people who hop the fence back and forth on how everything is. Now, since you did get to race both different series, or sanctioned bodies, rather, not series, but different sanctioned bodies, I know I touched a little bit of button heads back and forth between each other a little bit, but when it comes down to personalities out there, is there somebody that you get to race against a lot that you would say is kind of like your competitor or your rival that makes you want to drive better than you did the week before?
I wouldn't necessarily say I have a rival, but there are certain guys on the track that if I see their car underneath me, that I'd try a little. I may try too hard, but I try a little harder, to keep them from passing me. I try to race everybody, the same, race everybody clean. And there's a few guys that race harder than others, but I wouldn't say necessarily have a rival, but there are guys that I can race harder against because I know that they're a good racer. They're not gonna, run into me or anything like that. So I feel more comfortable racing harder against those guys than other people. So, kind of roundabout way to answer the question, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that I have a rival. I have a few buddies that I race pretty hard, but
little beating and banging every now and again never hurt nobody.
No, a little rubbing ain't so bad, but once you start bending stuff, and then that's where it kind of draws the line.
Yeah, of course. Nobody wants to get bent up and beat up race car. So now you did mention that you got to go to a couple different tracks. If you had to pick that there was a track out there, would you say you had a favorite track? And if you do, why is it that track?
My favorite track, a lot of it has to do with, the amenities and stuff that are near it, but it would be Lucas Oil Speedway down in Wheatland, Missouri. I went down there the last 2 years for USRA Nationals, and there's just I raced at Bristol 2 years ago as well, and I would say that facility would rival, it would rival in Bristol as far as the way the show was run and just the feel that you get when you pull up to the track. It feels it has a very professional feel to it, like you're pulling up to a NASCAR track almost. So that one is by far my favorite. It's a really fun track to run. It's always racy. It gets slick pretty fast, and it stays that way. It takes a long time for it to take rubber, so it's definitely a driver's track. And it's even when the first year when I went down there, they had a lot of rain the first night, and it was still a racy track the whole night. So there's a lot of other good tracks out there. I've raced quite a few around the state of Iowa. I hadn't probably my favorite one in Iowa to this point is Marshalltown. I actually didn't race there until this year, and once I went there, I kind of wished I had gone there sooner. It's just I have a track 5 miles from my house that races on the same night that Marshalltown does, so it took me a long time to find the right night to get there. But once I went there, it's a really fun track. That's a little bit technical. It kind of is deceiving. It's really easy to drive off the top of it, but it's usually pretty racy, and it's just kind of a fun track.
Now, when you said Bristol, were you talking about the Bristol, the greatest Coliseum or last great Coliseum left standing?
Yep, that's the one.
I thought that was the one you were talking about. Now, that is a different atmosphere in a whole, and I don't know who thought of it, but just let's go out there and just pack it down with dirt and let people run on it. I think that was an amazing, crazy idea that they had, and it worked.
Yep,
And that became one of those showstoppers that I loved watching NASCAR do.
yep. Yeah, it was a fun track. That first year, I felt like they could have let it slick off more. We really had a lot of, especially in the sport mods, we had a lot of races where the track was heavy, and so we were just wide open all the way around. So I'm sure it made for good racing still, but in the driver's seat, it was really hard to, especially with an IMCA car. An IMCA car ended up winning the show, but the track was pretty slick then, so it was more evened out. But when it was heavy, we were racing with some other cars from the East Coast and down south that felt like we had a significant disadvantage to. But when once the track slicked off, it was really fun. There's nothing nothing like the speeds that you're carrying around there. The biggest track that we have around us is a half mile. It's 5 miles from my house, and we're probably doing over 100 miles an hour there in a sport mod, or close to it, depending on how the track's running. And I run a 543 to a 529 gear, depending on the track conditions there. And I actually had to put a 5.0 in at Bristol, which is a taller gear. And I was actually getting ready to go down to a 486 because we were just carrying that much more speed. So we were probably doing.
So is Bristol something you would encourage both drivers from either sanctioning body that they definitely have to go and experience it at least once?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if they're going to do it again for our classes. It didn't sound like they were, but if given the opportunity, we didn't go the second year basically just because of the price of fuel. It was probably going to be about $2,000 just in diesel fuel to go out there and back this spring. So we decided not to go this year, but I mean, it's definitely something you want to experience in your lifetime. There's nothing like pulling onto that track where you pull through the gate and you're coming down the hill, basically on the track, or just even walking up through the tunnel and walking into the infield. There's nothing else like it. Like I said, Lucas Oil is definitely on par for the facility, but just the feel that Bristol has there's nothing else like it.
Now, my next question for you, moving on to the next year, are you planning on trying to run, say, particularly either side more or not, so that you can run for their national points more?
At this moment in time, no. I'm kind of waiting to see what the rules come out, if they're making changes, what changes they're making, and then I'll go from there. I kind of jump back and forth just because my closest tracks are USRA, and then there's a lot more IMCA tracks when I want to travel. I can travel. There's two USRA tracks within 25 minutes of my house, and the closest IMCA track's about 45 minutes. But within an hour and a half, I think there's probably 6 tracks that I can run for IMCA. So I don't have to go too terribly far to race an IMCA track. So I kind of just I don't really have any plans. I'm going to chase points at one track, but I'm kind of just going to bounce around and have fun and maybe experience some new tracks next year.
Well, it certainly sounds like a good plan to have moving on to next year. Now, the next question for you, with the experience you have, if there wasn't any kind of, things to hold you back as far as finance, sponsorship, or time out there, is there a class you would love to run more than the other classes out there?
I would definitely love to jump in a late model. class. I'd love to. I've driven an A-Mod one time, actually early on in my career, because the car that I got when I first started, I bought a race-ready car because I didn't really know what I was doing yet. And it turned out that the car wasn't so race-ready after all. But so then a buddy let me drive his A-Mod the second night out that I was ever in a car. So I've driven an A-Mod one time. I'd love to drive a stock car as well. But if I had to choose one, it'd definitely be a late model.
That's a lot of people's choices out there, honestly. But now moving on to this is, I found you through a YouTube live watching you racing at on iRacing. Is that something you like to do in your free time? Is play iRacing so that it can give you kind of like a better edge for the competition? And if so, what does that do for you coming to the tracks?
I actually haven't done a lot of iRacing up until recently. I purchased the license, or whatever you want to call it, for iRacing a few years ago, but I really just kind of dabbled with it here and there. I didn't really have a good computer to run it on, and so I built a computer last year, or probably 6 months ago now, that was capable of running it better, which allowed me to use it more. And so I thought it'd be something good in the off season to keep my reflexes. And so I definitely think it's going to help. If nothing else, just to practice running consistent lines, running consistent laps, keeping your reflexes, stuff like that, more than I would say, especially without a full rig or anything like that. It's hard to get the feel of the car. I do have a force feedback wheel, so that helps just a little bit. But it's definitely not the same feel that you get in a car. But it does. I do believe it's going to help keep the reflexes and just getting that consistency down better.
Now, I don't know if you've gotten the chance to listen to any of the other podcasts but this next question is probably a very loaded question for you. I know it's a very loaded question for a lot of people. But what does racing mean in your life the most to you?
I guess for me, it's something I've always wanted to do. It's definitely a way to get, out of the reality of life for a little bit and just, have one simple thing to focus on, get away from, all the bills and things that come with normal everyday life. But it's also, it's a huge aspect to kind of not just your family your mom and dad and everything like that, but the racing family that you get from it. There's nothing for people that haven't experienced it, of being part of that racing family or becoming part of the racing family. There's really not a good way to describe it, or not a good way to describe how close the racing family can be. And so that to me is a huge part of it. Once you're kind of in that family, or once you have been involved in racing, it's pretty hard to get out of it, because it's just, part of life at that point.
Now, before we go, is there anybody out there that you would like to say thank you for making your racing season better, or making it happen the way it has this year?
There's definitely, I could probably spend a half an hour thanking the amount of people that have helped me throughout my career so far. But I definitely want to thank, a lot of my sponsors. Without them, it'd be pretty hard to even get up and down the road. But a couple of my friends that have really helped, especially this year, is Brandon Tofty and Rocky Cottle. Rocky works for Bob Harris, and I'm running a GRT by Bob Harris currently, so he's a good wealth of information for that. Greg Elliott's helped me a lot in past years with different cars of, just learning the basics and learning what change, moving this bar, what does that change kind of thing. My neighbor up the street, Kane, Friday, I can't count the number of times that I've been working on the race car and trying to get things done last minute, and he must have a sixth sense or something because he comes over and helps me get it done just in time. I'm sure, there's probably 100 other people that I could thank, but those are probably the ones that are the biggest because they come to mind first. So.
Well, on behalf of us here at Rubbin' Dirt, we just have to say thank you again to our partnership with Dubby for making us continue to make this great podcast and still be able to reach out to people like you and other drivers and tracks out there. And we couldn't do it without you guys. And we thank you for your time, and obviously thank you to everybody that's helped you make it this far. And we look forward to hearing maybe from you next year and seeing how your season's going. Get a little bit of updates every now and again from you, and go from there, and wish you all the best of luck next year.
Appreciate it.
And that's where I think we're going to call this segment of Rubbin' Dirt, everybody.